We never cease striving to improve and get better. But nonetheless, there are a lot of good things happening despite the austerity environment. And I think it's really good for members to just reflect upon that. And also, the staff look forward to this report. They put a lot of work into summarising the work they've done over the year, and they really value the fact that members are listening to what they've achieved. So I'm sure all members have read the report, but I would like to pick out some highlights. I'm not going to go through the whole report in detail, but I think just going through some highlights just shows how much we've been up to over this year. So the report's broken down into the different parts of the Council, and the first part is at paragraph 4 is the work of the Public Services Support Unit. Now, the Public Services Support Unit is responsible for managing the whole of the partnership environment and some of the key corporate activities that we need to undertake as a council. One of the challenges that unit's had to deal with is the implementation of the new Welsh language regime, and there's been a huge amount of work negotiating with the Welsh Language Commissioner's Office and updating and agreeing a revised Welsh Language Standards Compliance Notice. And that work has resulted in substantial reduction in possible costs and can now be delivered within existing resources whilst satisfying the Welsh Language Commissioner that our duties towards our citizens are being maintained. So I think that's been a very big piece of work that the Public Services Support Unit should be thanked for. Another big piece of work that the PSSU have been doing is around the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Now, members will know that will be the lens statutorily in future that we look through everything that we do. And one of the things we have to do to start that process is a wellbeing assessment of where the benchmark should sit in terms of how we move forward with that legislation. That's been a huge piece of work which the PSSU have undertaken and successfully developed. And as part of that work, they've managed a transition from the old local service board arrangements to the new public service board arrangements. So a lot has gone on to achieve that. In terms of youth offending and community safety, which also sits within that remit, the Youth Offending Service have achieved a 93% positive outcome through working directly with 154 young people. And in terms of adults, a 89% positive outcome, working directly with 99 adults. This unit deals with our work with refugees. We have successfully supported 4 refugee families to resettle in Torfaen, and obviously it's confidential to those people, but there's some really heartwarming success stories around how we've worked with those families. And a further 2 families are going to be resettled shortly. And I think we should be proud as a council of our having stepped up to the challenge of supporting the resettlement of refugees. In terms of data, research and participation, our local land property gazetteer, which is a very important piece of equipment which allows us to map our properties and the way that we interact with residents, has achieved an exemplar gold standard, and the staff should be thanked for, I think, congratulated for that achievement. Moving on to social care and housing, members, I'm sure I don't need to tell you that the demand for services is very high, particularly across social care, and it's challenging to manage that demand within the resources available. Nonetheless, some very good work has taken place in terms of housing. The teams have generated over £13 million worth of housing-led investment into the borough. And during the year, a total of 5,471 vulnerable people have benefited from housing-related support services from the supporting service team. And this helps them to improve their independence and prevent more costly interventions later on. So not only is it really good for the people concerned, the vulnerable people concerned, but also it eases the pressures that we otherwise face in terms of social care budgets going forwards. And over £4,400,000 worth of social housing grant has helped to create an additional 96 new units of affordable housing across the borough. So in terms of your corporate priority around vulnerable people, the housing service has provided an important service in that respect. The performance and service transformation team which is based within social care, has led on the successful implementation of the Wales Community Care Information System in Torfaen. Now, that might sound a bit dry to you members, but I can tell you it was an immense amount of work to undertake that, moving an entire system from one area to another. And I know that the staff worked incredibly hard and put many, many hours in to achieve that. And of course, we have to have these systems in place and robust to ensure that vulnerable people are being kept safe. So that was a really good piece of work. Children and Family Services continues to be a real pressure on our budgets. We can't not respond when children are in need or at risk, but that can be a very costly undertaking for us. So a lot of work has gone on around transforming the children's services. A transformation team has been created which has set out some key objectives around early intervention and prevention, and that's the key to working with children and families. Once we get to the stage where children are at severe risk or need to come into looked after accommodation, it's really too late. The prevention and intervention is where we need to be focusing our efforts. And we've created a rapid response team to deliver intensive family support to maintain children at home and to prevent placement breakdown. We have high numbers of looked after children. I make no apology for that. Those children are safe. But nonetheless, it is a cost to the council. And if we can prevent those children coming into looked after accommodation, it's better for them and their families, but it's also much less of a pressure on our budget. We've recruited additional staff to our MIST therapeutic foster care service to work with children to return them nearer to home when appropriate, because placing children far away from their families is not good for anybody. And we've had a successful campaign in which we've recruited an additional 12 foster carers, and we've been focusing particularly on foster carers who will take on sibling groups and older children, because it's relatively easy to foster babies, but those sort of placements are more challenging, and we need foster carers who are prepared to take on those kind of responsibilities. In terms of adult services, again, another very busy year. It's not going to get less busy as people live to be older, which is wonderful, but with more complex health needs and obviously a rising incidence of dementia. So we've had a development of 5 patch-based social care teams during 2017. This has been a good development. It's helped us to manage demand more effectively, enable staff to make closer connections with the community, which is very important for older people, and to deliver better outcomes for individuals. The Community Connectors team, they've gone from strength to strength, and they've been working with 280 individuals between January and September, and they've really improved the quality of life for a number of vulnerable people by the community work that they do, bringing individuals into closer contact with the kind of service, the sort of support around them that can be achieved through community connection. Our Torfaen's Falls service has been a success for many years, preventing people from falling and helping them to rehabilitate when they do. And it's good to see that during 2017 they were recognised and won first prize in the NHS Awards for the delivery of a seamless service for people who've suffered falls. And this is a really good example of health and social care working together. Paragraph 6 looks at our education service. In terms of 21st century schools, there's been some terrific stuff going on. £21 million worth of investment over the last year in 3 primary schools. So £4.3 million in Garnteg, 3.7 million in Cumfredor, and 3.65 million in Penygarn. In terms of performance, we are never complacent about performance. We've been in a dark place in the past, and we're determined not to go there again, mostly because we need those outcomes for our young people. And performance has held its own by and large. Our primary schools are at or above expected levels. Foundation phase remains strong, and we're ranked 9th in Wales. Key Stage 2, we're ranked 12th in Wales. In secondary schools, Key Stage 3, which is a very important foundation for GCSEs, has improved on the core subject indicator, and in Key Stage 3 we're now ranked 7th in Wales. Key Stage 4 members, I'm sure, don't need to be told, experience a lot of volatility because the way that GCSEs were marked changed, and there was a fall across Wales of performance. But relatively, although we dropped by 2.3% at level 2+, compared with the rest of Wales, that was one of the lowest drops, in fact the third lowest drop, and our ranking has moved up to 14th in Wales, which for an area with the levels of deprivation that we have is something that we shouldn't be worried about, but as I say, we're never complacent about. We want to be higher up in those rankings, and we'll continue to strive to do so. In terms of additional learning needs, we've now formally agreed with Caerphilly Local Authority to have the Gwent Visual Impairment Service move in together with the Hearing Impairment Service and the Communication Impairment Service. So this will be a new service based in Llantarnam Business Park, which will be providing a very comprehensive service to children, families and schools. Attendance remains an important factor for us. If children are not in school, they cannot learn, so attendance is extremely important. We've been working very hard to engage head teachers with the education service staff to understand where the issues are and look at options, and we have a Strive for 95 initiative, which is encouraging families to reach a minimum of 95% attendance for each term every year. The catering and cleaning service sits within the education service, and they have successfully achieved ISO 9001-2015. So I think we need to congratulate them on that, because they've worked hard for that, and that's a good achievement. In terms of neighbourhoods, obviously a diverse range of service within neighbourhoods. The leader has already mentioned the snow clearing, and I'd like to add my thanks to the staff for the work they did there. I know that some, our machines are working 24 hours and sometimes mechanical failures as a result of that, but the staff also on a shift system were working 24 hours. We can't clear every road, but I think the staff did a terrific job. In terms of planning and development, financial contributions totalling £1,298,000, along with the provision of affordable housing, were secured through Section 106 obligations, negotiated through planning applications. We've seen 701 affordable units delivered, and a further 549 to exceed the original targets. So some really good progress on affordable housing. And during the current year, there's been some major planning developments. 41 affordable homes at Waynfelin, major industrial development at Springvale, further reserved matters application for 102 houses in South Sebastopol, and new infant blocks at Coedeva, new school at Croesacaeliog. So a lot of work going on in planning. In technical services, there have been some notable successes. I won't go through them all, but they're listed at 7.2, but I've already mentioned the work on 21st century schools. A lot of work has to go into that from the technical side, and the bringing in-house of the council's dry recycling, bulking and baling operation has also been a major piece of work. 7.3, if we look at public protection, the council is now working fully in partnership with Blaenau Gwent, which has allowed for resilience and also cost savings. Trading standards have undertaken 12 prosecutions and over 1,500 enforcement activities. Licensing, 250 taxi licences, 200 licensed vehicles and 15 private hire operators. And in public health and environmental protection, there's been a lot of activity going on, and particularly an environmental enforcement pilot scheme to regulate litter dropping and dog control was introduced in May 2017, and there have already been 5 prosecutions for fly tipping and 3 cautions to demonstrate we're really zero tolerant in environmental crime. I always mention the food hygiene inspectors. I've been out shadowing them, and I know what a great job they do, but they regularly achieve 100% completion of inspections of high-risk premises, and I think they need to be recognised for continuing to do that level of performance. In terms of economy and environment, obviously we've been very busy with the City deal, and members will know that the IQE investment in the semiconductor cluster just down the road from us off the M4, is a big deal for Torvine and for future skilled jobs for residents. Here in Torvine, since establishing its base in Cwmbran, Gen4 have created over 50 highly skilled jobs and will form part of a new centre of excellence for intelligent automation in the southeast of Wales. So we can begin to see a kind of cluster of high-tech semiconductor type industries which Cwmbran will certainly be part of in terms of the way City Deal is going. More than 200 attendees attended Torvine's second business exhibition and conference at Cwmbran Stadium, and footfall in Pontypool Indoor Market has increased by more than 20%. 8 World Heritage Youth Ambassadors have won a prestigious UK Diana Award for the work they've undertaken helping the World Heritage sector in respect of Blaenavon World Heritage Site, and I give them my warmest congratulations. It's a fantastic achievement. In terms of the SRS has been successful in adding a new partner, so Newport are now part of the SRS along with Torvine, Blaenau Gwent, Monmouthshire and Gwent Police, and Caerphilly are in the process of preparing a business case which we anticipate will result in Caerphilly also joining the SRS, so it will be a Gwent-wide ICT service. And certainly Welsh Government are very interested in what is being done in terms of collaboration on ICT within Gwent, because it isn't happening in other parts of Wales. In terms of the core, there's a lot about the SRS, but just to draw your attention to the core service, the SRS has typically taken between 1,500 and 2,000 service desk calls each month, and they are exceeding their service level agreement on resolution times each month between 1 and 3%. If I move you on to part 9 of the report, which is resources, the legal service have fully updated and revised the Constitution. In terms of legal and asset management, again, going back to 21st century schools, a lot of work's gone on there. And also the disposal programme has delivered £5 million, which will contribute to that 21st century schools programme. It was another successful year for the Shared Benefits Service with Monmouthshire Council. Since the transfer into the partnership arrangements, take-up of free school meals has increased by 7%, and we've also maintained our in-year collection rate in respect of council tax at 96.4%, which does benefit our budget, and it's important that that level is maintained. At 9.11, I just want to mention, because I think it's very important, the implementation of the corporate safeguarding training framework, including the rollout of mandatory basic awareness training for every employee. And I myself have done that piece of work, as have all my senior managers, and it's a very important training because safeguarding is everyone's business, not just people working in children's social services. And we've implemented a revised pay structure to accommodate the living wage, which I know is very important to members' hearts, and maintain the integrity of the pay and grading structure in the process. In terms of the Chief Executive Service, members will be aware of the T22 transformation programme. That's been developed and launched and is an ongoing, very large piece of work. It's extremely important. We cannot survive the current austerity regime, even with the very welcome announcement of additional funding, unless we transform the way that we deliver services. Just cutting is no longer viable. So this transformation programme is very important and will be led through Richard Edmonds' team. In terms of delivering the corporate plan, we've also successfully now developed the Council's business plan and set out how the organisational plans will meet members' 2020 goals set out in the corporate plan. Elections, I know you were all very much aware of the elections. We managed to deliver 2 elections, both the local government election and the parliamentary general election in June. In terms of the ABS, the Administration and Business Support Service, this was a huge piece of change for a number of staff within the council. It saved £1 million and will save £1 million ongoing revenue, but it was a very big piece of change. It meant a 30% reduction in the level of business support available. So not only was it difficult for the staff who were delivering it, but also for the staff who were used to receiving a different level of service. But everybody's worked tirelessly together to make that work. It is now working effectively, with a few glitches here and there, and we have saved that amount of revenue from the budget, which is very important. Members will be aware that the Customer Care Centre in Pontypool has been redesigned. It's much safer now. The barriers mean that staff and members are protected in a much better way than they were in the past. But at the same time, it's a more welcoming environment, and particularly the Express Desk has been a big success. I shadowed the Express Desk for a day, and it was a very interesting experience. They deal with 70% of customer inquiries straight away, and that makes a big difference in terms of being able to get people through the system and get them the result that they want as quickly as possible. In terms of complaints, there's been a centralised function for complaints, and that's been a part of the ABS restructure, and that's been a very big success. And since its inception, the Council's seen a marked reduction in the overall number of complaints received, and they've been dealt with more expeditiously and effectively. In terms of Community Services Unit, with skills and employability, the Bridges into Work and Working Skills for Adults funding has been secured until 2020. That's a terrific scheme which does really good things for people. Within Torvine, Bridges into Work has engaged with 400 out-of-work participants and helped them gain 300 qualifications, and 110 having completed a volunteering placement, and 63 moved into employment. And Torvine Training has secured a £3.95 million work-based learning contract and achieved 2 finalists in the National Apprentices Awards Cymru. The Adult and Community Learning Service had excellent results with attainment rates of 99% in essential skills qualifications and 100% passes in English and Maths GCSE. And the Youth Engagement and Progression team has worked very hard on keeping our levels of NEETs very low. That's people not in employment, education or training. Only 2% of Year 11 leavers did not achieve a post-16 progression. In terms of community development, the Community's First team has supported 3,872 residents with a focus increasingly on employability, and 623 participants have been supported to stabilise and improve their financial situation. The Social Prescriber Project, again something I shadowed, and it was very, very interesting day to shadow, has expanded to cover the south as well as the north of Torvine, and works alongside an increased number of GP practices. 80% of patients who engage with that service reported feeling more positive following the support that they received. And in sports development, lots of achievement there, but just to pick out 19 schools and over 4,500 young people are now taking part in the Daily Mile Torvine. Take a Stroll has 12 weekly walks with over 1,000 registered walkers and over 170 walking weekly. So members, there's a huge amount in the report, and that's just a summary of the highlights. You can see how much activity the staff have undertaken in 2017. Much innovation still going on despite austerity, and we are maintaining the majority of basic standards of service despite the financial restrictions. As we move into 2018 and beyond, it's not going to get any easier, but we will persevere in delivering improved quality of life for our citizens. So I hope, members, that you have found that interesting, and I would like to take this opportunity personally to thank the staff for all that they do. They work very hard. It's not easy to be a public servant nowadays, but they are here because they care, and I hope that members appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Members, do you have any questions or comments? We start here.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I'm very impressed with the work of the council, and I haven't been a member that long, but I'd particularly like to single out the work that goes on to support the scrutiny committees. The staff there are very professional, and they've done a marvellous job during the year that I've been there, and I'd just like to put on record my thanks.
Next then.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I'd also like to add my thanks to the officers for their support since I've been elected, for the work we've done in the Green Meadow Ward and certainly the Wylio Torvine. My question relates to paragraph 6, specifically on education, where we finished 9th in the foundation phase, 12th for Key Stage 2, and 14th for Key Stage 4. And my worry is that we seem to have, the language in the report seems to reflect a culture where we think this is acceptable, and it's not. What I want to see is more of a positive vision of where the educational service needs to be. I'd like to know how we're going to get there, and I'd like to see some accountability and responsibility for the performance to date.
Leo, would you like to?
Yeah. Well, I'm gratified by the members' contribution because it is something that we all should be concerned about. And as I said, I'm gratified that you are showing concern in this way. You can rest assured that we are not content or happy with the situation. I had a long conversation with the Minister at a conference at the end of November, just gone, where she congratulated us on our performance at Key Stage 4, because, as has already been mentioned, our performance, whilst going backwards a little more than 2%, did nevertheless hold well against the other 22 local authorities in terms of how we dealt with the rigours and complexities of the new examinations. I reminded her that in spite of that position, third or fourth, depending on the final outcome of statistics, was good in a superficial way, but we still nevertheless lost 2 points, went backwards 2 points. She reminded me that had it not been for the new examinations, then there would have been a different complexity altogether. Or a different complexion, rather. We are working very, very hard with our schools through the EAS to make sure that the new examinations weren't that negative, and I think the results proved that that was the case, but rest assured that we won't be sitting on any laurels. We are working very, very hard. In fact, the Director of Education, or the Chief Officer of Education, Dermot McChrystal, along with the Chief Executive of the EAS, Debbie Harsfeld, are making a contribution to the All Wales Improvement Policy. That is a Welsh Assembly Government project, and we wait with interest to see the outcome of that, because one of the reasons why we have that input is because we've been identified as very much holding our own in terms of the rigours and complexities of the new examination system. I take your point that, albeit an implicit point, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Key Stage 2 Foundation doing very, very well, but when it comes to Key Stage 4, something seems to be perhaps a bit awry. We're addressing that, and the way we're addressing that is clearly showing some kind of evidence of success, because in putting more resources and paying that much more attention to those earlier stages, over a longer period of time, the Key Stage 4 results will start to show a benefit. This isn't going to happen overnight, but certainly if you look at the positions we're in, Foundation, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3, then clearly that augurs well for the future going forward. If you want any further conversation on this, my door is always open, as I've already told you. One of the biggest problems that we have, and I thank you for the question because it allows me to perhaps expand on some of the issues that Alison brought to our attention. One of the big issues that we have at the moment is attendance, and I don't care what you think of attendance, whether or not you think that we're being perhaps a bit draconian about imposing this, that or the other. I don't think anybody that cares or understands anything about the education service can fail to grasp the notion that there is a stark connection between absenteeism and performance. We have a project going at the moment which is Strive for 95. It isn't just Strive for 95, because if that was the case, then perhaps 95 would be seen, 95% attendance that is, would maybe be seen as the lowest possible acceptable performance, and that isn't the case. It's strive for 95 plus. I was at a school yesterday that has a big problem with attendance. Some families were recidivist in terms of not necessarily concerned too much or cared too much about sending their kids to school. If you have a 90% attendance, then you're losing more than a year education throughout the career of your education with us. 95 still means that you're losing over the career of an 11-year school programme somewhere in excess of 7 months of learning. If you look at it that way, it's far, far easier to understand the connection between attendance and performance. We are narrowing that gap all the time. We are working very, very hard at doing so. And I think that already there are green shoots of improvement in that sense. I'd like to turn my attention to one of the earlier remarks by Alison in terms of the 21st Century Schools programme. Yes, we've got 3 brand new schools and they are state-of-the-art. Anybody that hasn't seen any of these schools so far, please take advantage. It's an open invitation for anybody. Contact me, I'll take them around these schools. Absolutely fantastic. My view has always been that if you've got good heads, good teachers, and a good ethos in the school, you can teach kids and they will develop irrespective of the surroundings. But all of that, if we take that as a given, if you wrap around that the state-of-the-art school, then we can only enhance that progress even further. So I repeat, anybody that wants to go around any one of these schools, contact me and I'll take them around, no problem at all. One thing that Alison didn't mention was Coediva School. She mentioned the 3 schools that we've built new. She's mentioned Ganteg and other schools. Coediva, that suffered nearly 2 years ago with that rather horrible fire, the new school building has risen from those ashes. On the 26th of January, we are taking possession of that new building from the developers. On the 29th, the following Monday, that new building will be open for business. There's a hell of a lot of activity that goes on in order to make sure that that happens. So what I wanted was to congratulate every member of the school community, not just the school community, but everybody else in the local community, because it has been a joint effort over the last 2 years, and it's now at last coming to fruition. I'll finish by saying this. We are not happy with where we are as an individual authority in terms of Key Stage 4 particularly, but we believe that the things that we put in place will drive those results to a better place beginning next year. If you ask me the same question after the results come out in August, we'll see what the future will provide for us, but I'm sure that you will be more than pleased with the results.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I just bring in the leader a second? I think and you might have something to say about the young ambassadors. Yeah, you sure? Okay, I'm just going to come in at the end then. Okay, if we move to Councillor Burnett then.
Thank you, Madam. Yes, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the officers and their teams for the hard work they put in throughout the year. And in times of austerity, they have to meet their budgets, and I know a lot of them personally how difficult it is for them. And as members, we all want the best for our wards, and we're all chipping away at them. I'm sure they get fed up sometimes. Oh, here they are again. No, I'm sure they are, Alison. No. But they do work tirelessly for us and support. And in this last 6 months, we have so many new members. I know some of the members on this side of the chamber have been very grateful for the support they've had off them. And it is a bit daunting in their first 6 months. So I do thank them all for that, and their teams. I'd like to thank also Cunnan and his team for inviting some of us down to recycling in Tycoch. To some people, it's a load of rubbish. To us, it was interesting. And I think everybody should pay a visit down there to see how much comes in and is baled, and it's tons of it. And really, everybody should know what happens to it, because we put in our bins, that's the last we see of it. But when you see it at the end of it, and how interesting it is, and what happens to it, and the cost, what goes out and the cost what comes back in. So I do thank them, and if anybody wants to go, then just go through Cunning. But this time of the year, really do warm, wrap up warm, because it's freezing down there. And my last thanks really does go to all the member services team that support us all as councillors, especially the new members we have here in the last 6 months. I know they really do put their all into us all. And again, with them, sometimes I'm sure if you walk into the room, they think, oh no, not another one. But I know they don't mean it really. Or do they? But they do work it tirelessly for us, and I do thank them all on behalf of everyone. And a Merry Christmas to them all. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mills next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We as ward members, the normal interaction we have with residents is when they wish to complain about the services that Torvine provide. But it was particularly pleasing last week when I personally had a number of residents phone me up to thank me on behalf of the council for all the hard work that the council staff had done. Not only the people that were clearing the snow away so that the vehicles can get through, but one instance is where the man who was delivering the community meals, he couldn't get to a number of houses in Newin, so he actually parked his car on the main road and actually walked to make sure that all the vulnerable people who rely on community meals got the meals when it was really cold and they couldn't get out. And I think that is just an example of the dedication and the hard work that all the staff do for the residents of Torvine. So on behalf of the Conservative members here, can I thank all council staff for all their hard work.
Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. 11.1, the last paragraph on page 38, and it concerns our pupils who are not in education, employment or training. In regarding the information given, it states that only 2% of year 11 leavers have not achieved a post-16 progression. I was just wondering, because I've got a figure of 50-35 in regarding the 2%, what's the actual number of pupils as opposed to a percentage? Because 2%, it seems quite low, but unless you've got the actual number, it's quite hard to collate.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I didn't think that you could go a full council without asking a question on education. So thank you very much. One of the difficulties that we have with meets is that there's usually, in terms of the appearance, the difference between a percentage and the numbers that underpin that percentage. There is a sense where those numbers could change very rapidly. At the moment, we are running at 2%, meets, that is, and that's pretty good. It compares favourably with other local authorities, but I'm not particularly interested in compare and contrast with other local authorities because that does nothing at all in terms of satisfaction levels for our own service. I'm reliably informed by the head of that particular section that a tremendous amount of hard work has been done trying to locate and fasten down those people that might very well come into this particular cohort. And therein lies the difficulty, because it isn't a question of knowing exactly at any given time where a group of people are, because if they're not in school, it's incredibly difficult to fasten on to that particular individual. So there's always a massive task trying to marry up the numbers with the statistics. But as accurate as we can get at the moment, we are operating around about 2%. What I will do is get hold of, in the nicest possible way, the head of that particular section and get some hard facts on the marrying up between the numbers concerned and the statistical representation. But it's always a pretty hairy situation trying to do that with any degree of accuracy. But as far as we are able to discern, 2% is as accurate as we can get at the moment.
I appreciate that, but if you could basically give me a figure and basically give it not only to myself but the rest of the council, I think they would appreciate that as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I got Sue next and then Fiona.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like personally myself as a newly elected councillor to thank all departments within the council that have been there with me, assisted me, guided me. Obviously, being a new councillor, I've had to find my way around, so thank you all within all departments. Secondly, 12 new foster applications have come through for foster carers. I would like personally to thank these 12 persons for doing this for the children of Torvine, and I'm sure other councillors within this room appreciate this also. Going to Communities First, I work quite closely with Communities First. They're out there, they're working at ground level, and from me personally and from my other role, thank them also for the valuable work they do out there fighting poverty. I can't thank them enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to say it was great to hear some positives from members. As you know, my portfolio covers an area that is mostly front-facing and affects our residents an awful lot. So when things do go astray, whether it means a bin isn't collected or a road isn't gritted, we do receive complaints. So it's fantastic to hear that positive feedback from members, and I really am grateful for that. I would like to reflect what Ron has actually said about the recycling as well. I've been out on the bins, on the recycling bins with the team, and I can tell you that it was a great experience and an eye-opener. As someone who was an avid recycler and thought I knew what it would be like, it was a great experience to go out and to really get to grips with it. And something that hasn't been mentioned yet is the fact that my department last year, we as a community, through the recycling service, recycled 63%, which is fantastic. We've made such a huge leap from where we were, where we started, to be where we are now. I think is something that we should be very proud of. It's a particularly high quality recycling as well. If anybody wants to know the technical details, I'm happy to explain. But yeah, that's a real positive. I don't want to miss anybody out in my department, but I'm going to have to because it's too big, and I'm sure you'd rather me be brief. But I will also highlight public protection as well. The fact that they have, as Alison had mentioned, challenged fly tipping and dropping litter and dog fouling. I know it's been a challenging policy, a trial that we've put in, but I thank members' support for going along with this trial. Street scene as well. Street scene and our newish system where we have area-based working. I've seen an improvement in my area. I hope other members have also seen an improvement. And thank you to their fantastic work. But most of all, I want to really thank the winter maintenance team. I think that what they did last week was outstanding. And frankly, all the other services that are here, they wouldn't have been able to go ahead if it wasn't for the fact that our roads were clear. So those crucial, that story that you presented, Councillor Mills, regarding Meals on Wheels. I heard many stories from across the community, whether it was our staff making sure that the most vulnerable people, people on dialysis, people with crucial hospital appointments, whether they got there, or whether it was our communities as well, pulling together to make sure streets were cleared and neighbours were checked on. So I'm most grateful for that. And like I said, there's so many parts to my department, but I can't say thank you to them all, so I'll just say a general thank you, and thank you to members.
Madam Mayor, I would just like to say thank you to Sue, because what she said I totally agree with, as I think we all do up here, especially about care for foster children. and for Communities First work. I'd also like to add a little bit about education, if I could. Education never ever stands alone. It always has to sit with social services and other things like Communities First, because education has a lot to do with deprivation, and we live in an area with a lot of deprivation, so I think we do very, very well to bring some families who are very resistant to education into the education system and for them to achieve qualifications. And I'd just like to ask a question. Having worked with NEETs for 30 years, I know how hard it is to engage some families in education, how disruptive they can be for other families who want to be in education, and how difficult it is to engage some young people. And I know that in the past, Green Meadow Farm has done some sterling work in engaging some young people in education programmes, whether it be with charities or with the Education Authority. And I would like to ask, is that still the case, that they're still doing that marvellous work? Thank you.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, but I will find out and let members know.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you very much. I won't echo all the thanks and individualise people. This is an excellent report, and I'd like to thank Alison. But Alison didn't put it together on her own. I'm sure all the officers contributed from their departments. So there's a number of councillors in this room who was here when you gave your first State of the Nation report, Alison, which is quite some years ago, and we've improved from one step to another, and we continue to improve. So I'd like to thank everybody in this team of Torfaen County Borough Council for their excellent work in what was 2017, and I wish them all a happy Christmas and a very happy New Year.
Okay, everybody in the leader then.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to all the councillors who've contributed to this debate. I think it's right at this time of year that we do say thank you to the staff that do so much work for the council. But I think there's been a good balance today between that praise and the emphasis on the fact that we need to keep focusing on performance. And I don't deny that balance needs to be struck. Partly, I think, because I don't think you achieve good performance without praising people for the good work they do. The old-fashioned sort of model of beating people around the head until they do what you want them to do, I just don't think works, even if I did think it was the right thing to do. So thank you for the time that you've taken today to go through this and to praise the work of the staff. Of course, it's beholden for me to say that the good things that happen and the good culture that I think exists in this organisation wouldn't exist without the leadership of Alison as the Chief Executive. And I'd like to thank her today, because she's maybe the person that she, for obvious reasons, left out of her own report. So I'd like to thank her for that, and just to say thank you to the staff, and to say that we look forward to working together in 2018 to continue to move forward with the areas of performance we do need to move forward with, and to maintain performance in other areas. That's not an easy thing. I think local government as a whole is unfairly maligned. Given the cuts we've had to face in the past 7 or 8 years, I think it's nothing short of a miracle that local services are still running to the extent they are across Britain, and that's thanks to the dedication and the self-sacrifice of our members of staff, most of whom haven't had a pay rise for several years, most of whom are overstretched trying to do more work every year with fewer staff. So I think it's a good thing at this time of year to say thank you to them. They're not, as the myth in some newspapers might have it, overpaid pen pushers. They're people who are paid very modestly and do a very good job delivering vital services and working hard to do so. So thank you to all the staff, and thank you to the members for your contributions today, because I think the staff really do appreciate the time that we've taken to praise the work that they do, albeit that our job often as councillors is to challenge.
Okay, members, the recommendation is on page 40 of the agenda. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you. All those in favour then, have a show of hands. Thank you. Anybody against? Anyone abstaining? No. Thank you, members. Recommendations are agreed. We move on now to agenda item 10, the Valleys Task Force. I ask Rachel Jowett, Chief Office for Neighbourhoods, Planning and Public Protection, to present your report, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Actually, it's my first council. I've been here 6 weeks. I'd just like to thank everyone for the warm welcome I've received, and also it's an absolute privilege to be your new Chief Officer. I did send an email out saying if you want me to come and get to know your patch, I'll be more than happy to come out. You know, I do appreciate that neighbourhood, as Councillor Cross has said, does tend to get quite a bit of member interest with some of the requests from your residents. I'm keen to understand, you know, that from a strategic but also practical operational level to ensure our response is as good as it possibly can be. So please take me up on the offer. I need to get to know Torfaen as quickly as possible. Before you today is a report on the Valleys Task Force. I think it's timely to bring to members prior to a whole series of sort of like events which can be taken forward in the new year. It is a Welsh Government-led initiative linked to sort of like really trying to inspire and regenerate the valleys in terms of some of the deep-rooted economic problems within the areas. And what Welsh Government have done is try to coordinate at a very high level and strategic level in terms of an action plan that came out in November. That action plan does have quite a lot of impact on councils in terms of a whole range of initiatives. I should say this isn't a lot of new things that are going in there. What they're trying to do is coordinate a whole range of activities to articulate what activity is going on within the Valleys communities and how they can be aligned and potentially help to deliver better. But the important thing in particular for ourselves and the task that we have been asked to do by Welsh Government is the creation of a blueprint which is linked around their proposal to sort of like increase productivity and jobs. And they have within their document named 7 strategic hubs, and they see those hubs as being sort of like drivers of economic development within their areas. Now, they have named it as Cwmbran. We are seeing it as more of an eastern valleys in terms of then trying to get that link up towards Pontypool and up the valley. And what they've asked Torfaen to do is to lead on the development of a blueprint for this hub. And importantly, you need to understand what that is involving and what the process is moving forward, and that's what the report outlines. At the same time as coming out with the Valleys Task Force, Welsh Government have also come out with their new Targeted Regeneration Investment Programme. This is a second phase to a programme. We've already been working with Melin and Bronavon on some schemes in Pontypool in particular called Viable and Vibrant Places. And what Welsh Government are doing, though, is they're changing the focus of that funding, and it's going to be done in a different way. And what we can see is they're going to be using that funding to help deliver the Valleys Task Force. So what we are proposing is a joint approach to those. So importantly for members, in regard to the targeted regeneration investment, before it was led by individual councils sending submissions into Welsh Government. They've changed that and they're now requiring a regional approach. And as you heard the Chief Executive say when she was talking about the State of the Nation, that the success of the City Deal to date and some of the investments, they have asked for a regional regeneration strategy to come from the City Deal framework, so the partnership of the 10 authorities. That will need to come back to councils in due course. It does change some of the governance structures or the responsibilities of the City Deal framework. So that regeneration strategy is being formed and being sort of like looked at by a group of officers. Our officers are around the table within that group, but then it will need to come back to council in due course for sign-up, because the funding will be delivered on, will potentially be allocated on a regional basis rather than local. So that is an important change which members need to be cited on. So in regards to the process with the Valleys Task Force, I must stress, this has been and is a Welsh Government-led programme. Officers have been given data to it, but there wasn't much consultation or engagement prior to the publication of the delivery plan. So what they have identified for sort of like the area for Torfaen in terms of where they think that the key economic drivers could be is the benefits on the back of the Grange University Hospital currently being built in Llanfrecffer. We have initiated conversations on a life sciences park, and those conversations are taking place at a high level now with Welsh Government and Aneurin Bevan on how we could potentially bring some really world-class employment research and development, innovation in the health sector, right next door to what will be a world-class university hospital as well. So those conversations are ongoing. They're talking about strategic employment sites. By this, they are looking at some of the major unallocated or undeveloped land in the Cwmbran area, but also then working on the transport side, particularly bus routes and the rail in and out of the county, is how do we get our people to where that employment is. In terms of town centre employment sites, this is some of the work linking on within Pontypool. How do we regenerate our town centres? How do we get more activity in our town centres? Because that's where, we don't want our town centres to die. And the residential-led mixed-use development is their fifth priority. This is where they are talking about how we get that mix within town centres of residential, sort of like the activity we've been doing with Mellon already, and also, though, potentially looking at some of the proposals which have come forward from Mymyled as well, in terms of a major new development and centre there. So the process moving forward is that the Welsh Government have stated a deadline. They want blueprints developed by January, which is 2 weeks away. But it's an aspirational timescale. We actually we felt it was really important that members on the back of this report have time to consider what they think is really important in terms of economic development and regeneration. And there's going to be a member seminar on the Monday, the 22nd of January. And we actually have the Welsh Government lead officer for the delivery plan coming to present to members and for them to hear back what you think is important for regeneration in the area. That will then be followed up with a workshop of local businesses within the area on the 25th of January. So we were very important that the member engagement had to come first to then feed into that engagement with businesses to then lead on to then the development of a blueprint. As they're looking for councils to develop it, the blueprint will then, and the sign-off will go through the due process. Aligned to that, as I said, there will be a further report coming back in terms of the targeted regeneration investment, in terms of what the regional strategy is likely to be. Appendix 2 to the report does outline what officers have submitted as draft at the moment, just into the regional discussion. We haven't seen what the other 9 councils have yet submitted, and as you can see, there is some very strong synergies between that and also what was in the Valleys Task Force, because we're keen to avoid duplication, ensure that all our sort of like strategy is in one direction. Hopefully I've given enough flavour and I'm happy to take any questions.
Stuart first.
Thank you very much for putting some flash on that, Rachel. What I would like to see is possibility, obviously I've got another hat I carry, which is the Deputy Leader of Cwmbran Community Council. Would like to see some involvement with community councils in that, because obviously we've all got an interest in what happens in our own patches. Also, I wonder whether you've thought of taking this to scrutiny, because it's an obvious scrutiny subject. Something that in the past we've done. Also, there's a lot in this as well, which I think, as well as I think I welcome the idea of a seminar, but there may be some discussion, for want of an inverted commas, on this one. Some ideas that members might have as well.
I think the developed blueprint would be an ideal place to go to scrutiny prior to then to sign off. And I think, I'm happy to have conversations individually or with groups of members, as well as the member seminar, so we get as much wealth of information as possible. What we can do is also write to the community councils, advising them of this process and asking for their feedback and input, and offer to go to meetings or to take their views, so we can do that.
Peter Jones next.
Thank you. Rachel, I was very interested in the Life Sciences Park at Grange University Hospital. I worked for many years as a government statistician dealing with R&D for the UK, and in Wales we're bottom of the league in terms of R&D. But my experience was, for life science parks to work, there needs to be engagement with academic institutions. Has there been any discussions with that yet, or what are the plans there, please?
We haven't yet. But we see that the role of Cardiff University, which is aligned to the Aneurin Bevan University Hospital and the board, being absolutely key to this. They are one of the leading R&Ds in health. And also then we've got the South Wales University are also doing some key work. Now there are examples of small Medi centres in Wales. There's a Welsh Wound Partnership which operates in Rhondda and Taff. That again it's a link between the health board, the hospital and the university, and then they try to bring in some of the innovative R&D, frontline cutting edge industries to sort of like work on that. The stage we are so far is we have, the leader has written to the relevant cabinet secretary, he's agreed to meet. I've engaged with the lead civil servants who are very, very keen and excited about the opportunity. The land next door to the hospital is already Welsh Government land, so we've got sort of that's sort of like, and it's earmarked for employment. What we are keen to do is to build on work that's been done in Cambridge. They've got a lot of Mediparks and linked to the universities there. We have had some sort of like high-level work done, just scoping out what are the critical success factors. It is about not just the employment offer, it's the housing offer, it's the education offer, it's the skills offer, it's the what is it going to look like on site. It's not just your normal factories. They want green space, they want open, they want recreational facilities, because these are high-end employment facilities that we would love to target. But it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I think it's one of the things, through my recruitment process, the Chief Executive made very clear that this was one of my priorities to help deliver on. So at the moment, we're having the conversations to get buy-in to the concept, and there's been discussions so far about sort of like, a team forming over 2018, and I think I'll be more than happy to keep members informed as we go through this. We said we are at the very, very beginning, but potentially really exciting for the borough as well.
Councillor Bevan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I cautiously welcome this report. I take it this is going to sit alongside the Cardiff City regional deal. Concerns I have surrounding this new announcement around the Grange and the Specialist Critical Care Centre. We waited a number of years for the Welsh Government to make a funding decision on the Specialist Critical Care Centre in Llanfrecvre, and what was actually come to fruition was downsized from the original plans that were put forward, about 3 years ago. I would possibly welcome the opportunity for creation of more jobs within my ward, but the concerns I have surround the funding issues. I note in the report that this would require significant investment from Torfaen, and whilst it does say that there's money to be made available from the Welsh Government, it does also go on to say that there's a 30% requirement for match funding for monies from Torfaen. And given the financial constraints, I'm not aware of the new monies that the lead alluded to earlier this morning, but on the previous financial settlement, we would do a cut of 0.8% in this year's funding. Given the pressure we've got on delivering schools under the 21st Century Schools programme, basically there's been no capital funding, no capital expenditure on any other projects basically in Torfaen other than building the new schools. So how are we now expected to find money for new infrastructure, links, developing these parks, and also without more money coming from the Welsh Government? And the other thing that we have to take into consideration, you say the land is available. Well, within the local development plan within Torfaen, it had already been met, and this council had agreed, given provisional agreement for further housing developments to go ahead. So I'd like your views on the conflicts between this proposed new business park and what's already been agreed in the local development plan, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. I think we've certainly looked at this and how this sits alongside City Deal. There are some parts which are complementary. There are some parts you could see could be conflicting or competing. And I think it's our job as councils who are engaged in both sets of the processes to ensure that there's complete synergy and there's not duplication. We haven't got the office, the time or the resources to do that. So the Valleys Task Force talks about things like business support alignment, so does City Deal. So what we're saying to Valleys Task Force is this is 7 authorities. We want to do business support across the 10, so let's keep it realistic and joined up. You're absolutely right, the targeted regeneration investment is a 70% grant, well, it's a pot of capital, which has to be match funded by at least 30% of non-Welsh Government sources. Now, we have done that in Torfaen under the VVP programme by using the access that Bronavon and Melin have to capital in terms of, they've been using it to redo and to refurbish properties to make them sort of like within town centres, to make them viable and good places to live. So that's one option for given the lack of capital within the council. It also, though, you can use private sector funding. So if they were coming to the table, so for example, on the Medipark, if there was private sector, university funding, health funding, those are all sorts of sources which can be targeted for those. So yes, we haven't got the internal resources for that. We appreciate that. So I think we're going to have to be, if we want to try and attract this funding, is be a bit more creative maybe than some of the others. But we've got some ideas, but this is a long-term pot of funding. It's not to be spent in 2018-19. So we've got time to work out proposals. I think in terms of the local development plan, there's always that conflict, isn't there, between housing and employment. Round by the hospital, there is some allocations for housing and also employment land as well. And I think that's going to be the conversation. There's a member seminar. It was meant to be last Monday. Obviously, we cancelled it because of the snow. It's being put back. Actually, it's on the same day now as the Valleys Task Force. You've got Valleys Task Force and then LDP, if you wanted to stay on, because we are going to be bringing through to members over January, February and March, the review report to initiate the new review of the local development plan. And I think that's one of the things we're keen to engage with members is what is the long-term strategy for Torfaen in terms of that employment housing mix and how do you get that balance. So I haven't got a straight answer on it for now, so I think it's one we'll be exploring as we go through the LDP process over the next couple of years.
I've got Councillor Jenkins next. Councillor Jenkins, did you want to speak? Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought you'd indicated. Okay, Councillor Seaborn then.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I welcome the report, and the report outlines the requirements for 2 Welsh Government-led initiatives, and they're critical for the importance of the well-being and prosperity of our citizens. That says it in 8.1 under the risks. I'd like to remind members of the population, whilst we're all here representing Torfaen, over the years, Cwmbran has lost out a great deal because other funding has been able to be targeted at other areas such as the World Heritage Site, the decision this council took many years ago to do the urban renewable monies to the north of the borough, and I recognise that there is a need for investment in the north of the borough, but Cwmbran very often loses out because they have a fantastic privately owned shopping precinct. And I know the officer came round with us last week, just before the snow, looking at the areas in Fairwater, and was quite surprised to see the deprivation in some of our housing and areas within the particular ward that I represent. And I'd like to remind officers that, if we have an opportunity to bring funding, to actually plan it for the whole of the borough, but not leave out certain areas. Thank you.
Councillor Evans next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Rachel, for a very interesting report, and obviously I welcome it, as do other councillors. I take particular reference to the acknowledgement that previous initiatives may not have been integrated as they needed to be, and that hopefully the dual policy going forward will improve that situation. We met with officers several times to discuss the situation with the links to the north of the borough, and hopefully this would be one method to identify and alleviate some of those problems.
Next I've got Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for that report, Rachel. I'm just looking on page 53, the South Torfaen Strategic Hub, and it says on there about a large-scale residential and mixed development at Mum Highland, which is going to come before very long. Then further down it says transport infrastructure and some improvements to A4042. I mean, that would need major improvements. I'm getting a bit worried here of what is in this report. It's absolutely marvellous, it's wonderful. But then we've got South Sebastopol being developed. If you go down there at 4 o'clock this afternoon, gridlock. You wouldn't get up here, Then you've got Mum Highland coming through. I mean, I would like to, before any developments, these infrastructures be put in place, because if going from Newport through to Pontypool, then up to Mum Highland, it's all very well and good to do all this development, but the infrastructure, they did put a new roundabout at South Sebastopol, which just slows everything up anyway. There's new developments coming along everywhere, new housing, but the infrastructure isn't there. It's a big worry for everybody. As I said, if you go down there this afternoon at 4 o'clock, from the Gwent Crematorium, Crosskilog, down to Pontypool, gridlock, and vice versa. So where does this infrastructure coming from?
I completely agree with you, because I was there yesterday at 4:15 trying to get my way through Cwmbran. I think sort of like, because I said this is a draft, the annex is a draft which is gone in, and it's sort of like making that point on a regional level that if there is to be development, then we also do need to look at the infrastructure. Now, obviously, Welsh Government's road, A4042 is a road programme. Welsh Government, it is their road. They have their road building programme. What we've got to constantly keep on doing is just keep on highlighting the need all the time for them to consider. But I think, we've got to acknowledge where they are with their programme, and we just got to keep on lobbying and making sure that it's on the radar. We don't have to say it with the A4042 can be at gridlock. The new in roundabout, when you're coming down the hill every day, we know that there is congestion. We know the studies have been looked at in terms of Pontypool, people in the morning coming down from Crumlin, or in the evenings going back up. Things have been looked at. It is sort of like just a case of where is the capital and where is the need. I think when we're sort of like looking at the transport infrastructure, it is about us. We recognise Cwmbran station does not have enough provision in there for the town it serves and the region it serves. It's half hourly to Cardiff to Newport. It's good accessibility. If we could get people down the valley to there or New Inn to access the train, it'd be far better. We know the regional transport shadow transport authority officers are currently modelling where the bus routes are going. Are they going to the right places at the moment? There's been identified in our borough there's a lack of movement between east and west. We're very good at going north and south, but we're not very good at going across the valleys. So if people are accessing employment in Pontypridd, say at the university, then we're lacking in there. So they're doing that work at the moment in terms of the transport infrastructure. Obviously, there's 750 million going into a metro system. A lot of that is sort of like up some of the other parts of the valleys, but it is about an integrated investment into bus and into sort of like the new rail franchise as well. So we've got to keep on looking at it all the time. It's not an easy answer to. We've got a growing population, more people have access to cars, but we also don't want to stand still with development as well. So I think it'd be one to have that conversation about how do we get the infrastructure in prior to development, when sometimes you need the development to pay for the infrastructure. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg conversation, which I think we'll be having quite a lot over the next few years as we develop the LDP.
Okay, can I bring in the leader a minute?
Just to say, there's a number of points that have been raised there I think are very valid. The first one is about integration with other initiatives, which I think is very important, primarily because the Valleys Task Force doesn't have separate funding linked to it, but is more a sign of an ambition by Welsh Government to bring everything together that covers the South Wales Valleys. I think it's very important that we don't allow different initiatives like the City Deal to go off in a different direction to things like the Valleys Task Force. Otherwise, they'll just, run counter to each other. The second very valid point that's been made, I think, is about geography. I think too often in the valleys we've allowed ourselves to be divided against each other, and other parts of the United Kingdom have sort of divided us and ruled. I think we need to make sure that we work together really to get investment into the borough and into the region as a whole, and not have one town sort of battling against another town and then only guaranteeing that they both lose. So I'm very keen that happens. The third point I think I wanted to bring up is the infrastructure. The question that's been raised, and I think is a very valid one. It's one when speaking to colleagues across South East Wales, they share. I won't rehearse other debates we've had in this chamber in previous council terms about South Sebastopol and about the congestion along Cumbrian Drive, as tempted though I am. But if you went to Caerphilly or to Pontypridd, you'd have the same discussions about the gridlock at key times of the day. And I think it's something that we've got to work with a bit of ambition to try and solve. Hopefully the money that Rachel's mentioned invested in the Metro will help to do that. But we need to make sure that that's all sort of integrated together with stuff like the Valleys Task Force, so that we deal with the infrastructure problems, so that they don't drag down everything else, as people have mentioned.
We've got Councillor Kemp next.
Thank you, Mayor. There we go. Could I first state that I totally agree with everything that Councillor Bevan has said, and so I won't labour that point, but I do have concerns regarding the timescales, if you like. The fact that, once again, Welsh Government has given us a tight timescale, if you like, and my concern is it too rushed, the fact that this is going to cost us an awful lot of money, whether in the short term or long term. If like it's still going to cost us money. It doesn't tie in with the regeneration of our corporate priorities as well. And so what I'm concerned about is, in regarding to the timescales, are we going to be tied into it knowing that we're only going to be producing a blueprint at the end of the day? Are we tying ourselves into it? And in regarding the future decision-making process under the recommendation 2, it says a further report will be brought back through the decision-making process in due course. Now, obviously today this topic has brought up a good debate as far as I'm concerned. My concern is basically, will the future report go straight to Cabinet, or will that report come straight to us for further debates? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I think it was on my first week of starting, I met the Welsh Government officer, and it was just as this sort of like was being released. We raised concerns over the timescales. To come out in November and to say have workshops with sort of like members or the businesses and the blueprint done by January. As you say, if you want something meaningful, just giving us 2 months to do it, give us enough time. We've raised that concerns with them. We're not going to be meeting the timescale for January for a blueprint, because our workshop with yourselves and then with businesses isn't until the last week of the month. What we've said to Welsh Government is if we're going to do this, we'd rather do it right. I also think it's important that any blueprint doesn't get too bogged down in detail, so we do tie ourselves up for the future. It needs to be sufficiently strategic, tie into existing programmes or initiatives that we've got going on. So we haven't quite finished the VVP1, so we want to keep on working with that. And also we've got to be mindful, if the funding mainly to do with this area is going to be on a regional basis through the targeted regeneration investment at a city deal, we want it to align with those processes as well. So my view is it's going to be relatively a strategic document, so we don't get sort of like, stung or held back with potential opportunities in the future. I think it's important. We have the members' seminar. I said happy to then to discuss with you all. I think, we've accepted Councillor Ashley's suggestion that this go to scrutiny. The blueprint goes to scrutiny, then prior to, and then potentially we can share it with them, with all members as well, to comment as a draft, and then it'll be sort of like cabinet for sign off. So there is that process of member engagement before it becomes a signed off strategy.
Okay, then I think we look at the recommendations then, which are on page 46 and 47 of the agenda. Can I have a mover and seconder? Moved, seconded, thank you. Can I have a show of hands, all those in favour? Anybody against? Anyone abstaining? Okay, thank you, members. The recommendations are agreed. On to agenda item 11. Blaenavon Town Centre Conservation Area, proposed Article 4, direction to area of Broad Street. Can I ask Richard Lewis, Head of Development Management, Planning and Public Protection, to present the report for us, please? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. This report is about the implementation of an Article 4 direction order for 7 residential properties in the core area of Blaenavon Town Centre and in the conservation area. The background to this report is that the Council approved the Blaenavon Town Centre Conservation Area Management Plan in the October Council. One of the recommendations in that approved plan is that the Council should consider introducing an Article 4 direction on the residential properties in Broad Street, which is the core area. In addition to that, the Council has secured round 1 of Heritage Lottery Fund for a Townscape Heritage Programme in the central area of Broad Street, and that means that we are able to access up to £1.2 million to support improvements in the conservation area. We're currently preparing for round 2 of that bid. Now, the Heritage Lottery Fund has specifically requested that the Council considers implementing an Article 4 order in order to better manage development and safeguard that investment within the conservation area. So, an Article 4 direction, what does it mean? What does it do? At the moment, residential properties have quite a wide range of permitted development rights, which basically means they can do certain works to the house or in their gardens without the need for planning permission, subject to certain criteria such as the position, dimensions, materials used. What an Article 4 direction will do is to remove those rights, which means that planning permission would be required for those works, which means that we would have control over the management of those works. If they would normally be permitted development, any planning application wouldn't involve a planning fee. Now, the purpose is not to prevent development, but the purpose is to make sure that it's properly managed in the interests of the conservation area. Now, the sort of works that would be normally permitted development, subject to that criteria, and what we're looking to remove and withdraw on those properties, are enlargements and improvements, alterations, which includes doors and window changes, roof alterations, porches, buildings, enclosures or containers, hard surface areas, gates, fences, walls and other means of enclosure, painting, demolition of the whole or any part of any gate, fence, wall or other means of enclosure, being works that all could have an effect on the conservation area if not properly controlled. Now, in terms of process, we would need to serve a notice on the owners of those 7 properties affected and publicise it locally in the press. That would mean that an Article 4 direction would come into force for a period of up to 6 months. So it wouldn't be permanent, it would be up to 6 months. We would then carry out consultation with the properties affected, and we would then come back to Council with a report within that 6-month period, taking account of those consultation responses, to consider whether that direction order should be made on a permanent basis. Now, if it is approved by members to be done on a permanent basis, we would then need to monitor the effectiveness of that to see how successful it's been. But there's no right of appeal against that direction, and it remains valid until it's cancelled by the Council. So the recommendation on paragraph 13.1 is that the Council approves an Article 4 direction for a period up to 6 months, that we would then commence a formal consultation period, and that a further report will be brought back to Council to consider a permanent direction, taking account of those representations. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Stuart Evans on first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Richard, for the report. We're between a rock and a hard place here. Obviously, I want to take this up because it's benefit the grant system that's in place. Just a couple of questions I need to ask you to clarify. In regard to the planning application fees, you say that wouldn't apply to the people concerned?
Yeah,
that's the one question. The other question.
Yeah, in terms of the fees, first of all, if something would normally be permitted development, so it doesn't need planning permission, if we remove those rights and somebody applied for that development, it wouldn't incur a planning fee. So they wouldn't need to pay a planning fee in those circumstances. In terms of solar panels, another improvement, we've only included those things that would be permitted development in a conservation area, but there's a whole host of things that if properties within a conservation already can't do, and solar panels and other things like that are included in other parts of the legislation. So they are already protected, in other words.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Please excuse my ignorance on this matter. I'm not an expert in dealing with properties that fall in conservation areas, but it strikes me as being a bit odd that we've been asked to vote on this now as members. Could not the consultation with the residents have been undertaken first before members were asked to vote on this? Why is it being put forward before full council if it is in fact a planning matter? Should it not have gone through the planning committee? And thirdly, would there not have been restrictions on what the residents can and can't do anyway already in place, given that they're already in a designated conservation area? I can understand if this is an essential process in securing funding, but it does seem a bit strange that we're being asked to take these extraordinary measures just to secure funding. I know sources of funding are hard to come by, but I appreciate a bit of feedback on those questions. Thank you.
Okay, in terms of the why not make a decision after the consultation period, the process for issuing an Article 4 is laid down in statute. So we can't change that, and the first thing that we do is serve the notice. That's prior to consultation. So what we're asking members to do at the moment is to allow us to serve the notices, which protects those properties, or the works of those properties, for up to 6 months. In terms of consultation, that must take place after that notice has been served. So we can't change that. That is actually the laid down process. In terms of it coming to planning committee, we weren't sure. We did check legally whether it should go to planning committee or council, and the advice that we had was it should come to council. And it links back into the previous reports that were done on the conservation area management plan that also came to council. And then in terms of the restrictions, yes, properties within a conservation already have restrictions. The works that I read out aren't actually restricted within a conservation area, and that's the purpose of an Article 4. So it's a common measure that planning authorities would use across the whole of Wales, where a conservation area, because of its particular special character, the authority can remove certain permitted developer rights from that over and above the current restrictions.
Hello. Some of the properties have already had work done with such as double glazing. How is that going to affect them now? Is that going to be planning, retrospective planning, or it'll prevent any future work being done?
This only applies to future work, so any alterations that have already been carried out or started won't be affected.
Okay then, members. If we look at recommendations on page 62 of the agenda, can I have a mover and seconder, please? Yeah, seconder. Thank you. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour of recommendations? Thank you. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? No, thank you, members. The recommendations are agreed. Okay, if we move on to agenda item 12, minor revisions to the Constitution. Can I ask Justine Cass, Interim Deputy Monitoring Officer, to present the report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The report concerns minor revisions to the Constitution. This includes updating the decision-making responsibilities associated with the existing leadership structures, amending some wording that precludes some non-executive members from attending the Cross-Cutting and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and ensuring that previously agreed changes are reflected consistently and accurately throughout the Constitution as a whole. The current version of the Constitution is number 49, not version 48. The first change is updating the decision-making responsibilities, and this is for the roles of the Head of Strategic Services and the Head of the PSSU. This will be added to the list of post holders recognised as Chief Officers for the purposes of decision-making in Torfaen. The changes proposed, as these are the only Heads of Service posts that report directly to the Chief Executive. There are no financial implications with this change. The revised paragraph 11.1.2 of the Constitution will read as follows. Chief Executive, Assistant Chief Executive Communities, Assistant Chief Executive Resources, Chief Officer Social Care and Housing, Chief Officer Neighbourhoods Planning and Public Protection, Chief Legal Officer and Monitoring Officer, Chief Officer Education, Chief Operating Officer in respect of the SRS Public Management Board, Head of Strategic Services and Head of PSSU. Can I state in relation to the post of Chief Legal Officer and Monitoring Officer, posts aren't permanent at the moment, and this is the reason why that post remains in that wording. In relation to the Head of Strategic Services, that is the title of the substantive post. Head of Democratic Services is within that. So that is the correct job title. The second change would enable all non-executive members to attend the Cross-Cutting and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It's proposed that the word scrutiny members in paragraph 6.5.1 of the Constitution is amended to read non-executive members. It was discovered that 2 members were not scrutiny members, so if we state all non-executive members, then it will enable everybody to attend the Cross-Cutting and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The last change will allow us to address a number of anomalies. A number of cross-referencing issues have been identified that need to be addressed to ensure consistency throughout the Constitution. These all relate to previously agreed changes, such as no longer appointing vice-chairs of committees. And it's proposed to update the document to reflect these inaccuracies. Therefore, it is asked that Council agrees that the Head of Strategic Services and the Head of PSSU be added to the list of post holders recognised as Chief Officers for the purpose of decision-making. The words scrutiny members is replaced by the words non-executive members in paragraph 6.5.1 of the Constitution. The cross-referencing issues and inaccuracies referenced in paragraph 6.5.1 of this report can be addressed and applied consistently throughout the document, and the interim monitoring officer, in consultation with the members' constitution working party, be given delegated authority to amend the constitution to reflect the changes set out in this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions or comments? Yeah, Hugh.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's very small technicality, but effectively the changes to the words from 5.2.1, it is proposed that the word scrutiny members in paragraph 6.5.1 of the Constitution be amended to read non-executive members. That's effectively redundant because with the change allowing non-executive members to attend the cross-cutting and resources overview and scrutiny committee meeting, they thereby effectively become scrutiny members. So the word change is not necessary.
Throughout the document, we refer to members as scrutiny members. Having a more generic term, such as non-executive members, just encompasses different members, and so it's more inclusive.
Any other questions or comments, members? No, in that case, if we look at the recommendations on page 73, can we have a mover and seconder? Thank you. A show of hands, please, all those in favour of the recommendations. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? In that case, the recommendations are agreed. Thank you, members. We go on to agenda item 13, motions on notice. Motion 1, press the leader to move and explain your motion for us, please. I think we're on page 75 of the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I want to ask for Council's permission, really. Unfortunately, Councillor Davis was unwell this morning, has had to go home, but he wanted me to move the motion on his behalf, so if members are happy with me doing so, then I'll continue. The draft motion is that this Council agrees to adopt the Motor Neurone Disease M&D Charter, which sets out the care and support that people living with motor neurone disease and their carers deserve and should expect. The Motor Neurone Disease Charter is made up of 5 points. Firstly, the right to an early diagnosis and information. Secondly, the right to access quality care and treatments. 3, the right to be treated as individuals and with dignity and respect. 4, the right to maximise their quality of life. 5, carers of people with motor neurone disease have the right to be valued, respected, listened to and well supported. The rationale is that by adopting the Motor Neurone Disease Charter, this Council agrees to promote the Charter and make it available to all councillors, council staff, partner organisations and health and social care professionals who deliver services for the council. We will raise awareness of motor neurone disease and what good care looks like for those living with this devastating disease, as stated in the Charter, and do everything we can as the council to positively influence the quality of life for local people with motor neurone disease and their carers living in our community. Many decisions about services used by people with motor neurone disease, such as social care, housing adaptations and support for carers, are made at the local level by councillors. There are significant differences in the quality of services available to people with motor neurone disease locally, depending on where they happen to live in the country. As such, it is important that councillors and all those working for and with the council understand the needs of people with motor neurone disease and their carers. By forming partnerships, we will help council to raise awareness internally and ultimately achieve better outcomes for people living with the disease. The aim of the Motor Neurone Disease Charter is that every time a council makes a decision, they think about the impact on people living with motor neurone disease and their carers in the community. As the focus of the campaign is local, the specific outcomes will depend on the area and what change is needed. They expect that the adoption of the Charter will be the first step in a lasting relationship with councils, where we work together to ensure that people with motor neurone disease get the right care, in the right place and at the right time. Councillor Davis has asked me to just put a little bit of a personal narrative on this as well. He says that 106 days ago, my father passed away. 127 days ago, he was diagnosed with motor neurone disease. I thought I had months or even perhaps a year to prepare. Nothing like the horror I actually faced during those final 21 days as the disease rapidly took hold of him. I didn't know who to talk to, who could help, what to expect or how to be prepared. I lived a nightmare, feeling so helpless, a feeling that will be with me forever. After Dad's death, I discovered the Motor Neuron Disease Association and their charter, which many other councils have adopted, ensuring that there are clear signposting to the services we as a council can offer, along with a greater understanding by staff and councillors for the 6 people who will develop this disease today, along with the many sufferers currently within Torvine. If adopted today, we will be council number 60 to adopt the charter around the country. I welcome the representatives here today from the South East Wales branch of the Motor Neuron Disease Association in the public gallery and thank them for their support during this dark time. So if we pass that today, not only will we be paying tribute to a former mayor and councillor of ours who was a good friend of lots of us, but also pledging to do our best for other people who are affected by this disease. So I'd like to move the motion on behalf of Councillor Davis.
Do we have a seconder? Members, do you wish to debate or comment or? Hugh first.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm quite touched by this motion, actually, because I too I've just recently lost my first cousin to this horrible disease. It's extremely debilitating, and the person that ends up is just a sort of a shadow of their former self. My cousin Lynn survived 2 years. Worked from first diagnosis when they thought it was perhaps she'd had a mild stroke, but it was about probably 9 months, I think, from full diagnosis to when she sadly passed away. So I do support the motion broadly, obviously. The question I have, though, please, is with regards to if we are stipulating rights to access quality care and treatments. In the case of my cousin, it was the family that ended up having to pay for that quality care and treatment. And the question obviously is financial in nature surrounding the guaranteeing rights to access quality care and treatments. Does that then impose any financial obligation on the council to meet the costs of that care?
Okay, because it's a motion, we can't really get officers involved. So I think we'll just have to talk, just bear that in mind. I won't come back to Anthony until the end, because otherwise it will end the debate. So we'll have other people's comments and questions first, and then sort of sum up at the end. Rose, next.
Very much. I welcome this motion. With regard to the question of finance, I believe that continuing healthcare is the responsibility of the Health Authority at the moment, in conjunction with our social services, obviously. But the financial burden and the health support is with the Health Authority. And I hope, as partners of this council, we would work together to welcome this motion from Councillor Davis. I think there's a lot of people in Torvine actually suffering from lots of diseases, and it's part of our corporate plan to help those that are in vulnerable situations.
Thank you, Rose. I've also got Gwyn down.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to welcome the motion, but is there any chance we could have a seminar and somebody could come and talk to us and explain to us as councillors, if we got him in our ward, we could understand it better?
I'll come back to that now as well. Stuart, did you want to? Yeah.
I don't know anybody personally, but I have come across people at the Carers Centre and other places, and the point I was going to make was the point of a motion like this is actually to highlight the condition and to do exactly what Wynn's just suggested, which is to actually have information and stuff. And what Rose suggested, that a lot about this is giving him further information and insight into conditions like this. And I think it's a wonderful motion, to be quite honest. And I remember Giles talking about the condition and how shocked he was about it. And I like to support it greatly, to be honest. The work of the actual organisations on the ground, we've got more organisations like this, we might get a few more of these, but the point about it is to support the work of organisations like this, the people behind us, and their awareness raising and their activities is what it's about. The resources are obviously in the health service and our social services and the families, and it's that partnership, that collaboration between them. It's really, really important, and obviously issues involved with that and how we focus that. So I dearly like to support this, and I know it's an awful condition. Hugh very affectionately said about his own family as well. I like to support it. Thank you.
Okay, if I ask Anthony to come back in then, and we'll...
Thank you for those points. I think Councillor Jenkins' request for a seminar is a good one, actually, and that will help us to discuss some of these questions in greater detail. I know with the question about finance, the point of the motion and the charter is to help signpost better, as opposed to a request for specific finance potentially. And Giles is more than happy to act as a champion. I know that much, to help sort of act in that role. But a seminar will help us to address some of those, and maybe we could get the Health Board along to that seminar to ask them those questions of how we can better work together to make sure that people are provided for.
Okay, so can we take another question? She wants to talk. Can we do that now? Yeah. Okay. Let's take it quickly, then we'll just pose a debate.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I know it's unusual for a member to speak after the leader has spoken, but I was just very quickly going to say, did you want to take legal advice on the content of the motion to make sure that we're not obliging ourselves to anything in supporting this motion that we were not intending to?
I'm happy with the way the motion has gone through the members. I don't have any legal issues with it.
Okay then, right, we're going to close the debate then. Asking, where are we? Further down than I think we are. Okay, is there any amendment? Anybody wish to suggest an amendment or anything? No? If not, then we'll go on to the actual vote. So can I have a show of hands, all those in favour of the motion? Okay, thank you. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? Okay, thank you, members. That's been carried. Thank you very much. If we move on then, there's another motion from Councillor Rose Seaborn, as shown on page 76 of the agenda. Rose, could you move and explain your motion for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My motion is on the universal credit. This council notes that Torfaen was one of the current pilot areas for the full-service universal credit, the single monthly payment, which replaces the 6 current working age benefits. This council also notes that within our area there is a large number of people affected by these changes. Torfaen Council notes with concern the growing evidence of considerable financial hardship for many of those people moving onto this new system of benefit payments. Before a full rollout of universal credit, the following problems need to be addressed. The waiting period for claimants to receive their benefits. The idea that all workers are in jobs where they are paid a month in arrears ignores the reality of the 1.5 million workers who struggle on 0 hours, insecure jobs or forced self-employment. Claimants need to be paid from day one. Payments going to one named member of the household Many claimants struggle to budget, and payments should be made to the separate claimants within a household and on a fortnightly rather than a monthly basis. With the present policy, there is a real danger that if the whole benefit goes to one named individual, there is no guarantee that the money will be distributed fairly within that household. Claimants need to have their rent paid directly to landlords to avoid unacceptably high levels of arrears and homelessness. Pushing claimants into debt adds to the stress and insecurity of claimants. An end to benefit sanctions, as there is no evidence that sanctioning helps people into work. In fact, taking away claimants' ability to feed themselves and their families prevents them from focusing on finding employment, as they are too busy trying to survive. The evidence of the harm that sanctions cause is growing. They are an unnecessary cruelty in our benefit system. Allow all new benefits all new claimants to apply for universal credit in job centres with the support of trained job-centred staff. Forcing new claimants to apply online causes real problems for many people who don't have either access to the IT skills to cope with the complex online application. The planned job centre closures also needs to be reversed, as claimants need face-to-face support to help them back into work and to deal with the complexity of universal credit. Abandon the in-work conditionality for part-time or low-paid workers. The idea that there are extra hours or higher paid work for a large number of these affected workers is simply not the case. This clause of universal credit places the emphasis on individuals who often want greater numbers of hours of work and not on the employer who benefit from short hours and insecurity. The overall level that universal credit funded needs to be urgently increased. The rate at which some claimants will lose benefit is set at 63 pence in the pound, which, when compared with the top rate of income tax of 45% on incomes over £150,000 a year, demonstrates just how unfair universal credit is for the lowest income households. The Council notes with concern, therefore, that the implementation of the full-service universal credit is likely to prove seriously detrimental to the health and well-being of thousands of our local residents. Torvine Council therefore resolves to jointly write to the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, asking that the system of universal credit is redesigned in such a way that it removes the inherent risks that this Council has expressed its concern over. We also ask for a further report on the impact of full-service universal credit at a future Council meeting. I ask you to support this motion.
Thank you. Is the motion seconded?
Yes.
Members, does anybody wish to comment or debate? Oh, yeah.
Yes, thank you. This is a matter that's going to be discussed at scrutiny in the not-too-distant future. And as a member of that committee, I personally would prefer to wait until after that scrutiny committee to see the recommendations that might come out of that.
Does anybody else wish to speak? No, in that case, does anybody wish to move an amendment? Yeah.
Does Councillor Jones wish to make an amendment?
Yeah. Councillor Seaborn, do you wish to make an amendment that we wait until after scrutiny, or are you happy to proceed?
I'd just make a point on the Councillor's comment, please. There is no reason why we can't take this to scrutiny. This is an ongoing rollout across the country, and it's going to affect an enormous amount of people. We were a pilot in Torvine, but, you know, things are not right. They need to be put right before they roll out the rest of the country.
Okay.
Could I ask, what I would say is we can make this observation. I can't see how it would affect scrutiny other than the fact, as a council, we can make this observation to who was the Secretary of State. I mean, there's a whole lot of issues involved with this. I certainly would like to see another seminar with our joint housing team on the subject, which we did last council. It was worth seeing because there's some very good work being done by this council and collaborative partners. I think that would, and I fully support what Rose is saying here, to be quite honest. And the only reason I wonder whether I got to do a declaration of interest. I've got close relatives on this, and it's appalling. The whole regime is absolutely appalling, and and the stories I'm hearing about it, especially people with mental health and autism and stuff like having to go on this system, it just horrifies me, to be quite honest with you.
Okay then, if we move to the vote then. Everybody in favour of the motion, can show hands please. Thank you. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? Thank you members, the motion has been carried. Okay, if we move on to agenda item 14, member question time. There are 6 questions today shown on the sheet circulated. We'll start with question 1 from Councillor Kelly Preston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could I ask the Executive Member for Environment to please provide the total cost to Torfaen Council of returning to collect waste or recycling that is not put out for collection in the appropriate waste or recycling containers, we call that side waste, for the last financial year, please?
Thank you for your question. We would like to thank Torfaen residents for helping us to achieve a recycling rate of 63% last year. The current method of operation for waste and recycling collection was agreed as part of the twin bin rollout in 2006, and as part of that rollout the decision was taken that the waste service would not return to collect waste or recycling that had not been put out for collection in the appropriate waste or recycling containers referred to as side waste. This policy was reiterated as part of the skinny bin rollout. Where such issues are reported to Council, the matter will be investigated by the waste team to determine if the source of the waste can be identified. If the source can be identified, then the originator of the waste is contacted and given an opportunity to remove the waste. But if there's no evidence that can identify the source, then the waste will be collected by our street scene service as part of their normal duties. I can inform Council that in the period of October 16 to September 2017, we had a total of 544 inquiries for this type of waste. We undertook 7 million collections. We undertake 7 million collections a year. So this is 0.007% of the actual collections. However, I do not underestimate how passionate people are. And residents, how they get passionate about this particular issue and their waste. This is important. We are keen to address it. Whilst the numbers are important but still small, it would not be practicable for us to set up a separate financial monitoring system for this issue. It is managed within existing budget provisions. Thank you.
Councillor Preston, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you. As a new councillor for the Fairwater Ward, I'm contacted on a weekly basis by residents reporting issues of waste or recycling that hasn't been collected due to be putting out in the wrong containers or in carrier bags. In most cases, the weekly reports I receive are for the same areas, week in, week out. It's the same streets, it's the same area, it's the same collection points, and it's incredibly frustrating for those residents who continually have to live with this. You've in part answered this. What are Torfaen Council doing to tackle the issue? I know that we're going back, we're visiting, we're looking for evidence, but if I'm getting reports week in, week out, the same streets, we need to do a bit more, I think.
Again, thank you for your question there, and that I can reflect very similar experience in my own ward. So it's not something that we're happy about naturally, and it does affect how we feel about our communities if we're constantly seeing rubbish and waste on the side. That's not positive. Education, yes, it's definitely done. We hold regular road shows undertaken in schools and community visits. And the side waste policy is explained during the twin bin rollout. We had a very extensive consultation before we went to doing the new skinny bin as well. And, you know, we would have made an opportunity there to actually inform residents. It is a continual challenge that we need to inform residents to make sure that they do put things in the right bins. Thank you.
Second question again from Councillor Preston.
Thank you. Can the Executive Member for Housing tell me how many people are currently waiting on the Home Seeker Register for social housing in Torfaen, and how many of those people are classified as homeless?
Of course. Thank you for the question on housing. Always pleased to have a question on housing. We've got 3 today. So, simple answer is that there are 2,521 applicants on the Home Seeker Register, and 74 of these are on homeless band. So that answers your question. I'll expand a bit further though. Not that much, mind. So from the last financial year, we had this, because this is, I need to highlight the pressures that we're under in housing, because we're under significant pressure. We've got a small team, and there's a lot of challenges ahead. So from the last financial year, we had over 136 applicants joined the Home Seeker Register each week, and about 50,000 bids were made on 866 properties in the financial year, equating to 58 bids per property. So there will be some bids where there will be over 100 bids on there. There may be some bids where there'll be less. So there are significant challenges in Torfaen where housing is concerned. 877 households at risk of homelessness contacted the Council for Assistance in 2016-17. 269 households were placed in temporary accommodation in 2016-17. So I think I'm preempting your next question, but I just wanted the rest of the members to know those stats, because that's the challenge we face.
Supplementary question.
Thank you for the figures. It really is a challenge, and housing is something that I'm very passionate about, particularly social housing and increasing the amount of social housing that we have. Can you tell me what we're doing as an authority to work with partners, or you know, anything that we're doing to help tackle the housing crisis locally?
I think the key there is working with partners, because we've got quite a lot of good partners in RSLs and other third sector organisations where we've got good relations with them, and we'll continue to work with them. Last year we secured £4.4 million of investment of funding that delivered 96 affordable homes. That's got to be where we're working. We need more affordable homes to rent and buy, because ultimately, whatever we make, we're holding a seminar on Home Seeker in January, because I felt that members had quite a lot of questions on it. Some fair questions which I think need answering before we go forward. But ultimately it comes down to the availability of properties, so it has to be affordable properties. This year we've commenced, work has commenced on an additional 150 units which will be completed in early 2018, and following the announcement by the Welsh Government of the target of 20,000 new affordable homes during this Welsh Assembly term, we'll be given an additional grant, which is fantastic, but it's a challenge, because in Torfaen it's land availability and availability of prospective projects. So this is going to be part of a summit, a housing summit that we're going to call in March this year, which will involve all councillors, all partners, all stakeholders. Because I think absolutely everyone needs to be involved in this agenda, because it's one where we all need to be pulling in the right direction, and there'll be an opportunity for you all to feed into it if you've got ideas for projects, ideas for ways of working in your own wards where we can do something, because housing is an area of challenge, but it's also an area where we can actually do something. In the new year, we've got on the issue of homelessness, we've got the architect from a project in Worcester coming to speak to us. Myself and some housing officers about a project they've been delivering in Worcester, which is alleviating homelessness there. It's basically the deliverance of affordable prefab buildings. Some of you may have seen news about this. It's a fantastic project. They're really high quality units that could be used for homeless individuals, rough sleepers, or young people, where there are challenges. I've gone a bit too long now, but quite a lot basically. But more can be done, and it will be done with your support.
Thank you. Question 3, Councillor Ashley.
Thank you there. My question was on behalf of residents of Pentland Avenue and Newid Farm Close. I didn't put that bit on there. And it's about parking on T-junctions. Where their road adjoins with Park Avenue, which is a T-junction especially, but it might as well be about a large number of similar junctions in this borough. When does your department provide double yellow lines and engage with associated enforcement to stop motorists parking on T-junctions?
Thank you for your question. So, in response, Rule 243 of the Highway Code states that motorists do not stop or park opposite or within 10 metres, that's 32 feet, of a junction, except in an authorised parking space. So, if vehicles are parked in such a manner, then the police, as the enforcement agency, have existing powers to prosecute motorists for appropriate offences. Notwithstanding the above, the authority regularly receive requests from local ward members and constituents to apply parking restrictions, i.e. double yellow lines, to prevent obstruction and or inappropriate parking from occurring in residential areas. To address these issues, the Department has adopted a policy which allows for consideration of the implementation of traffic regulation orders on routes to be considered core networks, so that's your A and your B roads, or local distributor, and those areas that suffer from high levels of parking due to a particular attraction. Perceived problems in other areas, i.e. residential roads, would be addressed using a combination of whether any other action by the authority would be appropriate, or a referral to Headley Gwent Police to consider whether the use of their existing powers as they relate to obstructive and inappropriate parking would be appropriate. And in considering Pentland Avenue specifically and the Park Avenue junction against the above, it is considered that the best way to deal with the issue raised in your inquiry would be to forward these concerns to Headley Gwent Police to consider the use of their existing enforcement powers rather than applying parking restrictions. So I will therefore pass on this information to one of my officers to ensure that this is passed on to the police on your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you
do
for
you have
that.
a supplementary?
I do, yes. Thank you for that. I was about to say, if you have the powers, what constraints in terms of resources enforcement? You sort of answered it, but I will have this, because I've got this one loaded, as it were. What enforcement do you have now, and will this change in future? Will this help the residents of Pentland Avenue and to Newid Farm Close and adjoining roads?
I don't think it's fair that I comment on that at this point. This is something that we're exploring, but we're at the very beginning of. For members that aren't aware, the local policing authorities are relinquishing their powers, giving away their powers in terms of parking offences specifically. And some councils are already taking over that duty, but Gwent Police have allowed us some time to put a policy and make a decision together ourselves. So I can't say for certain specifically on that area what would happen, but I would imagine it would be fairly similar to what's happening now. It's just that we would be the enforcers rather than the police. But I'll come back to you at some point when I've got more information, if that's okay.
Thank you there. Could I have that in writing, what you said to me, the two bits, if I may, please?
Well, I'm pretty sure it'll be in writing in the minutes, but yeah, sure.
Right, can I have a question for Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor. In January 2014, the Council unanimously agreed to note a series of measures to increase the number of pollinating insects in Torfaen, to include the planting of a wildflower corridor from the north to the south of Torfaen. What financial resources have been allocated to this project since its inception, and to what cost?
Thank you for your question. Since 2014's the council meeting, the council's biodiversity duty has been enhanced under S.6 of the Environment Wales Act 2016, making this activity a statutory duty. During the period, the sum of £84,000 has been spent on establishing wildflower verges, of which £25,000 came from an external grant aid. We are continuing to evaluate the activity and are constantly or continually looking at whether there are more cost-effective ways to establish wildflower areas that support pollinators. Interestingly, Monmouthshire County Council has adopted a pollinator policy and amended its approach to grass maintenance and annual planting, which has resulted in a total annual saving of £95,000. I'm not suggesting that we're going to make a similar saving, because the geography of Torvine is obviously vastly different from Monmouthshire, but we will be reviewing our approaches over the next few months with an aim to make some savings whilst still delivering a very important part of our duties in biodiversity. Thank you.
The supplementary, Councillor Kemp.
In 2014, wildflower areas were seeded and were deemed to be very successful in most areas. In 2015, the wildflower blooms became fewer. In 2016, the blooms became very, very sparse. However, in 2017, spring came and went, summer came and went, with the given amount of £84,000 allocated towards wildflower pollination projects. My question is, without singing, where have all the wildflowers gone? Long time passing.
Thank you for that rendition as well. I'm going to have to come back to you because it's a fair question, what happened. I do know anecdotally from my own questioning as a member, not as an exec member, that it is hit and miss sometimes when we plant the seeds. Sometimes they take, sometimes they don't. But we need to find better, more effective ways of making sure that the pollinators, the outcome is what we want, isn't it? It's a better biodiversity. And so it's a valid point, it's a valid question, and I'll certainly come back to you.
Thank you. Question 5, Councillor Kemp again.
Thank you, Mayor. On the 9th of November 2017, under the request from the Welsh Government, a rough sleepers count was undertaken across Torvine, resulting in a zero number of rough sleeper contacts being made. On the morning of the count, although Torvine knew the location of at least 2 of its homeless residents, one of which, due to health and safety reasons, could not be approached, the residents were not included in the supply data that was sent to the Welsh Government. If there were any health and safety reasons why any of our rough sleeping residents should not have been approached, should they have been included in the supply data that was sent to the Welsh Government, thereby giving a true and accurate collected data account in regard to the number of residents who are indeed rough sleeping across Torvine.
Thanks for that question, Councillor Kemp. And I think it would probably be remiss not to acknowledge that Councillor Kemp actually joined the rough sleeper count for the 2nd year running, I believe. So, and I know this is a particular area that you have a lot of passion for, and I have a lot of time for that level of passion. So, just wanted to say that before I launched into the script. So, Welsh Government have determined the specific definition for the purposes of the rough sleeping study, and count that the council must adhere to whilst undertaking the count. The definition given is people sleeping, about to bed down, sitting in or standing next to their bedding, or actually bedded down in the open air, such as on the streets, in tents, doorways, parks, bus shelters or encampments. It includes people bedded down in buildings or other places not designed for habitation, such as stairwells, barns, sheds, car parks, cars, derelict boats, stations or bashes. The count was undertaken with a specific period overnight on a particular night of the year. This year was 9th of November. Prior to the count, the council is also required to undertake a 2-week consultation exercise across a number of local agencies in Torvine, which asks them to identify any individuals or areas where they are aware of where people may be sleeping rough. As a result, the Housing Service received information relating to a small number of potential rough sleepers and their locations. All of these locations were included in the count, however, no one was identified that met the definition, so therefore a zero count was reported. In addition, the team specifically visited sites and areas on the night of the count where the council had previously received reports of people sleeping rough prior to the count, and I can confirm that there were no sightings at that point. In order to identify and provide support for rough sleepers, information about their whereabouts and well-being is essential. Therefore, it's important that we ensure we gather this information from a range of means, which is why I'm pleased to announce the launch of an addition to a homelessness reporting option to our Torvine Council app. As a result of the Housing Service working closely with the Council's communications team and customer care team, we have developed a page for the Council's mobile app which will allow any member of the public who thinks that someone is sleeping rough and who is homeless to pass on this information directly to the homelessness prevention team, so we can quickly identify the individual and get support in there as soon as possible, so thereby better facilitating the reporting of homelessness in the borough, which I think is the strain of question that you're going down.
Councillor Kent, do you have a supplementary?
Not in regarding that one question.
Thank you. If you move on to question 6 then.
Thank you, Mayor. It has recently been reported that the number of people rough sleeping in the city of Newport has risen, and yet Torvine, as part of its rough sleepers count, submitted a zero number of rough sleeping residents to the Welsh Government. Are any of the people rough sleeping in Newport true residents of Torvine? What practical support and help would be available to any of our residents if they were to find themselves having to sleep rough in Torvine?
Thank you. So, should a Torvine resident be rough sleeping in another local authority area and they had no other form of local connection to that area, then they would be referred back to Torvine. To date, we've not received any referrals from Newport Council. In regard to what would happen should someone present as homeless, rough sleeping, anyone who is homeless and rough sleeping would be offered advice and support, and an assessment would be made of their personal circumstances. Referrals would be made to appropriate local crisis support services. The Housing Service works closely with support providers who would be able to provide access to food, clothing, bathing, washing facilities and cold weather provisions, sleeping bags and tents. The Council supports these service providers with contributions from the cold weather payments, and in addition we've also got an excellent working relationship with a range of different agencies, including Citizens Advice, Torvine Mind, Gwalia, Shelter, Trap2, who also provide essential support to vulnerable people. We've had a number of recent examples of people sleeping rough who've been offered crisis support and assistance but have refused our help. So this has been a bit of a learning curve for me, really, because I've been out volunteering with an organisation I volunteer with, and it can be quite complicated, as I'm sure you'll find. It can be quite complicated when you find somebody in a circumstance where they do need help, and they clearly need help, but they at that point in time they don't want that help for whatever reason. They don't want that help, but we do keep going. We do keep going back, and the moment that they do need help, we're there for them. So I hope that answers your question. I've gone a bit over.
So, Count, do you have a supplementary?
I do, Mayor. I've taken on board that Torvine hasn't had any referrals from other authorities, but I've been made aware that there are Torvine people in Newport as such, and I appreciate that. We haven't had a referral back. But with the financial strain on local services, should Torvine County Borough Council be doing more to support other local authorities who are having to support Torvine homeless people? If yes, what? If no, why not?
This is a tricky one. This is really difficult because obviously each local authority has its own homelessness support programme, and each local authority, particularly the surrounding local authority, has different levels of priority for different areas. So I think it's a difficult one. Basically, I think that the onus is on us to provide as much support as we can for citizens of Torvine. I think we're probably straying into areas that we probably shouldn't stray into in propping up other local authorities to do the work they should be doing. All I can say is that locally we're doing absolutely as much as we can, and from my perspective we will be prioritising. We'll be prioritising prevention, because I think that the point where someone is rough sleeping and homeless, that is the most expensive point in that period, and that needs the most intervention. So we need to stop them in the... Am I still there? Yeah. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you about this, or a debate if we need a debate about this after. But basically, I say what I said earlier, which is you've got a passion on this subject, and I'm on a learning curve. More than happy to work with you. My door is definitely open to yourself and anybody else who's got ideas and thoughts on this. So thanks for the questions.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 15. Date and time of the next meeting. For your information, members, the next council meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, 30th of January, 10 a.m. in the council chamber. Agenda item 16, Cabinet decisions from the 16th of November. Members, the Cabinet decisions start on page 79 of the agenda. There were no challenges to any of the decisions. Are there any questions about them? No, in that case, are we all happy to note the Cabinet? Question? Yeah, sorry, Councillor Bevan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I did have a concern about the executive member decision that was given due to time constraints, because it seemed to preclude the normal due process, allowing time for challenge. And I did have concerns about that. That was with regards to the funding being granted.
Can we just clarify which one it was? Sorry. This is
Let me try and find the report back now.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Bevan. Sorry, I did put it on. This was to do with the works the initial works for... Oops. Sorry, it keeps going off. Is that your question? Sorry, Councillor Bevan. Yes, yeah. No, it's fine. No, my understanding was that in order to meet the overall 21st Century Schools programme, we had to take a decision at this stage so that the construction works could start, and even waiting for call-in would have put the works back to such an extent that we would then be in difficulty with the timetable. So we did take legal advice as to whether it was an appropriate matter where urgency could be applied, and the advice of the monitoring officer was it was. So on that basis, the decision was taken as an urgent decision.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, for those members, apologies, it was on the top of page 82. It was the funding for Pennygarn Primary School.
Sorry, I was answering the wrong...
So, yeah, that was the award of the 3.4 million. But, yeah, the Chief Exec has answered the question there to say that legal opinion was taken. So, thank you very much for that.
In that case, then, members, are we okay to note those Cabinet decisions? For show of hands. Thank you, they noted. We move on to agenda item 17, which are Cabinet decisions from the 28th of November. On page 81 of the agenda, again, there were no challenges to any of the decisions. Are there any questions about them? No, in that case, is everybody happy to note them? Oh, no, because... Go on.
Apologies, Madam Mayor. I'll be very quick. I'm conscious of time. I unfortunately couldn't get part this morning, so I'm in Tesco's and I've got to get back within the 3 hours. So I'll make it very quick. Are there any implications of the transfer of the Pontier Primary Church in Wales School to the Monmouthshire Diocese?
I don't know the answer to that, but John Tushingham may be able to help.
Sorry, could you just repeat the question?
I said, are there any implications of the transfer of the Pontier Church in Wales School, that's the primary school in Pontier, to the Monmouthshire Diocese?
It's more of an administrative issue. If the school was to cease to be a school, it reverts back to the council. So there's no real implications, but it's a condition for the charitable trust that transfer takes place. It should have happened a long time ago, and we've just been catching up with that process.
Okay then, I'll be happy to note those decisions then. Yep, okay. Official end of the council meeting. I'd like to thank everybody for your attendance and contributions. Remind you all to sign the attendance register and the personal interest form. To put cards back on the wall. Also reminding you that there are mince pies and tea outside, and also in the spirit of the season, a raffle from a charity, so don't think you can sneak off without buying a ticket. Other than that, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I hope everybody has a good holiday.